Hey everyone, welcome back to another side quest of Jeff's Adventuring Academy, where I talk about adventure games, and I don't have Russ with me, but you know who I do have with me is a friend of mine named Matt. Say hi, Matt.
Hi, Matt.
Exactly what I expected to get. Today we're going to talk about the Discworld series of adventure games. There are actually 3 of them, although you would be forgiven if you thought there were only 2.
And if we want to get technical, there's a 4th one, but it was, the original one was made back in the 80s for a British computer that nobody remembers, so let's just forget about it.
Is that different than the Mud, or is that the Mud?
No, the Mud is completely different, and I actually played on the Mud back in the day in late 90s, early 2000s. Mud, for those of you who don't know, is short for Multi-User Dungeon. That is what we had before World of Warcraft, where a bunch of people just coded and created their own little games with text-based descriptions, but it had computerized enemies, NPCs. It was pretty amazing, and the Discworld Mud was created by a bunch of very devout fans of the writings of Sir Terry Pratchett. It was made completely non-profit. I think it's still around.
Oh, probably.
But,
Things like that never die.
Yeah, but if it was not officially endorsed, it was at least heavily smiled upon. But the whole idea was that you create your character and you created a person who was part of a Discworld. You picked a class, typically warrior, thief, assassin, wizard, witch, and this was after my time, but I heard that they added in a fool class because Fool's Guild surprisingly combat oriented if you have read the books.
Yeah, and I probably should have brought that up at the beginning in case you aren't familiar with Discworld. Discworld is the series still exists, but we're not going to get new books in it. A long-running fantasy series written by Terry Pratchett. It is a British author. It's a British series. It started out predominantly as a parody of the fantasy genre, although it did kind of quickly morph into being more of I hesitate to say serious, but it stops being a parody of fantasy and instead parodizes our lives, our world, through the lens of the Discworld. The Discworld is a giant flat disc that sits on the back of 4 elephants riding on the back of a giant turtle as it swims through space. That should give you an idea of the kind of setting we're talking about. So I haven't heard about this first game that you talked about, though. So do you want to tell me more about that before we get into the 3 we really came here to discuss?
Right. Well, this game was called The Color of Magic. It was based on the very first of the Discworld books, which was also called The Color of Magic. It was originally made for the ZX Spectrum, which was the British computer. They also did a Commodore 64 version, but I'm not sure if that ever got imported to the States. But it was just pretty much a recreation of the plot of the book. You played Rincewind the Wizard trying to survive all of the stupidity thrown at him as he is forced to safeguard the world's first tourist.
Yep, that's pretty plot accurate, which is funny because the first 2 games, which are probably the most well-known games, both of them star Rincewind, voiced by Eric Idle, right?
Eric Idle from Monty Python. That was actually what got me into the series in the first place. I just saw the original Discworld game in Best Buy and had a big sticker on the box that said, featuring Monty Python's Eric Idle as the voice of Rincewind. And since I was one of those obnoxious 14-year-olds who memorized Monty Python skits in lieu of having an actual sense of humor, that was just crack to me. But I played the game. I liked it. It had a lot of other great British comedy actors doing the voice work. Tony Robinson from Blackadder.
Nigel Planer.
John Pertwee, the Third Doctor, voiced the bad guy in the first game. And Tony Robinson and Nigel Planer also read a lot of the first wave of Discworld audiobooks, so there was a bit of a connection there.
Yeah, Nigel Planer does the unabridged, and Tony Robinson does the abridged.
And they also have cameos in the very first Discworld movie, Hogfather.
Those movies are actually really good. I'm disappointed that they stopped making them. But one of the things I was going to say is what's really interesting about these first 2 games, they star Rincewind and they are based off of the plot of Discworld books. But the first one is based off of Guards, which Rincewind isn't in, and the second one is based off of Reaper Man, which, if Rincewind is in it, it's as a small cameo, not the main character.
I think it was actually Morky had the small cameo. Rincewind does not appear in Reaper Man.
Okay, I couldn't remember categorically off the top of my head, but the interesting thing is that they picked two books that did not feature Rincewind heavily, if at all, to have Rincewind star as the main character in the adaptation.
It made sense from a marketing perspective, I think, because as Terry Pratchett put in one interview, if I wrote according to what the fans wanted, I'd be writing nothing but Rincewind books.
Well, and Rincewind is a hard character to write. I'm deeply impressed that he can. We're going to get into the game in a second, but just Rincewind as a character in the books, a little less so in the games. His main objective is to not be in the story. He is a coward who just wants to live a nice, quiet life. He does not want to be the main character of anything. He doesn't want to be near any trauma, any adventure. Please, he's at his happiest when he's an assistant librarian, and his job is feeding bananas to the librarian, who is an orangutan. So it's really interesting to read the Rincewind books, where 90% of those books is him trying to get out of the plot, trying to get away from the story, which is tricky to write, but Terry Pratchett does it very well.
And he did know his limits and realized that gag became very boring very quick. But yeah, Rincewind is one of the rare examples of the lovable coward. I mean, the only other one I can think of that has anywhere close to a prominent position is Shaggy and Scooby-Doo.
Yeah, that's fair, actually. So the first game, I know it's available. I know it's on the PlayStation 1, although I don't recommend playing it that way because it seems a little overpowered for the PlayStation. It starts bogging down as you're trying to play it. But the plot of the first game is a secret cult is resurrecting a dragon to threaten the city with, to basically hold the city hostage. And Rincewind has to figure out, why is there a dragon? Dragons aren't supposed to exist anymore. Where is the dragon? How did it get here? And so on.
And then how to get rid of a dragon. And then after failing to do that, how to stop the dragon. And then how to make himself into a hero capable of slaying a dragon, which leads to a whole ludicrous thing in Act 3 where you have to figure out, well, anybody slaying a dragon is 1,000,000 to 1 chance. So you have to figure out exactly what elements a hero would have to have a 1,000,000 to 1 chance, and then go and find those elements, which involve finding a magic sword that goes ting. And finding the sword is pretty easy. It's getting it tuned so it makes the ting that's the tricky part.
Yeah, they point out in the original book, you know, whenever there's 1,000,000 to 1 chance, 9 times out of 10 it works for the hero. So, you know, 1,000,000 to 1 chance is almost a certainty if you make it exactly 1,000,000 to 1 chance. So in the book, there's a whole scene of like, okay, what if you're blindfolded, standing on one leg and shooting over your shoulder backwards? That's 1,000,000 to 1, right? No, the other leg. So when did when did you play the first one? What year was that? Was it on release?
It was pretty close to after release. It would have been, I was in high school, so, you know, 94, 95, somewhere in there.
See, I was in high school. I was invited over to a friend's house because they knew I liked the books, and they were like, there's a game. And I went, there's a game? And went over and played it at their house on the PlayStation, which, again, bogs down pretty quick.
Yeah, I had the PC version.
But it's a very fun game because it does carry Discworld's habit of making fun of the fantasy genre, making fun of our world, but it has an added layer of making fun of adventure games in general, right? There's a lot of humor around, let me guess, I need to go and collect a laundry list of items in order to accomplish this mission.
Right, the quest I mentioned about finding the magic sword and making it go ting, well, eventually Rincewind finds out in order to get the sword tuned, he has to go to a dwarven smith because dwarves are the best at getting, you know, swords tuned, which, you know, that's an old trope for fantasy. So you go to a dwarf mine after finding one, and you talk to the dwarf smith and ask if he will tune your sword, and he'll say, oh, yes, absolutely, no problem. That's it? You're just going to do it? Oh, I'm happy to do it. Well, it's just that normally whenever I ask somebody to do some basic task for me, they make me go and do some mind-boggling quest that makes me have to go through 3 different things to get the job done. And, oh, well, if we're going to do it traditionally, well, we don't have to do it traditionally. No, tradition's very important, which is a bit of a joke in the books because dwarves are very tradition-minded and... Yeah, so then just what has this other dwarf say, well, you could ask him for a glass of elderberry wine. Aye, go get me a glass of elderberry wine, which then leads to the much more ludicrous and way more difficult than it needs to be quest of going to the bar, trying to order elderberry wine, discovering that they can't get elderberry wine because the elderberry wine is in the basement and there's some monster in the basement. So then you have to go and track down the boogeyman, which is one of the scariest monsters around. But the boogeyman you found has agoraphobia and won't come out from behind the door. So then you have to find a screwdriver. I forget where you get the screwdriver from. You have to use the screwdriver to remove the screws off the door so you can carry the door in front of him. And then he will go and scare the monster in the basement, which turns out to be a mouse.
Yep.
But then you can get the elderberry wine, and then you can go get your sword tuned.
Yeah,
and this is typical. I mean, everybody knows adventure games, knows this sort of thing is par for the course, but Rincewind just gets downright snarky about this toward the end.
Exactly. He becomes very aware of the situation that he's in, and it's pretty much fourth wall breaking because he's identifying with the gamer at that point. Like, yeah, you and I both know this is getting ridiculous. Which
is why I think they did make him the main character for the games, because while he's much snarkier in the games than he is in the books, Rincewind does have that same sort of awareness, in the later books at least, where I know how the world works. I know what's going to happen. I know how it is not going to be this easy. In fact, he spends most of the last continent trying to run from trouble and then saying, this isn't going to work, is it? Okay, fine. What do you need me to do to save everyone?
Yeah.
Let's just get it over with.
There's also The Last Hero, where they build essentially a spaceship to go and visit the gods, and they're getting a crew together, and Rincewind just walks up and goes, all right, I'll go. And everybody's like, what? And he's like, look, I know how this is going to go. You're going to want me to go. I don't want to go. So I'm going to run, and I'm going to hide in like a crate or something. And that crate just so happens to get loaded onto the ship. And then I find myself suddenly on the ship and unable to. So let's just do it. No matter what I do, I'm going to end up on this stupid mission. Let's just go. Which is, yes, it's very Rincewind. What other notable things do you want to talk about with the first game? Apart from just having a really excellent tone in keeping with the spirit of the Discworld books.
Well, I think it is worth noting that even though Terry Pratchett did not directly assist with the designing of the game, Pratchett himself was an avid gamer. He ran D&D games for his friends back in the 80s. He played adventure games, and the luggage, never a thing from the games. Rincewind in the books has a magical luggage that follows him around, and you in the game have his luggage with you. So the classic adventure game trope of just being able to stuff whatever you have in your pockets, no matter how big it is, it actually makes sense for Rincewind because he has this little luggage with 1,000 legs walking around behind him holding everything.
Yep.
Which does actually lead to another puzzle where, in order to keep the elderberry wine, you have to put it in Rincewind's personal inventory rather than the luggage, because if you put it in the luggage will drink it.
Yep. It's very fun. And then
But Pratchett, I was going to say, but Pratchett was an avid gamer, and sidetrack a little bit because I was just fascinated by this. He got really into the Elder Scrolls games later on, and this kind of informed one of his later books, because his later books, as Jeff said, Pratchett, he never became completely serious, but he did become more focused on trying to have a point to his books beyond the comedy, if that makes sense. It's like he went from being the Douglas Adams of fantasy and just writing a bunch of skits in a fantasy world instead of the sci-fi setting to trying to do more stuff like Gulliver's Travels, where yes, there's a bunch of silliness, yes, I'm making fun of people, but I also have a point with, how we're comparing the Winniettes and the Yahoos to how Irish government is acting at the time. And Pratchett became obsessed with the idea of how most games are built around killing stuff to take their stuff and winning the game that way. And he wound up opining about the game Oblivion, and Morrowind, how you can go into these sewers and there are these goblins living in the sewers and they have no purpose other than being there to get in your way and you killing them to take their loot and sell it. And how he just thought, I just wonder, what's the culture of these guys? Why are they living in the sewer? Do they like living in the sewer? Is there something down there that's, are they forced down there because they're second-class citizens? Why are the goblins in the sewer? And somebody wound up making a whole mod based around this whole idea that the goblins need a culture, and they added all this stuff into Morrowind just to give the goblins some point, so you aren't just slaughtering a bunch of random mooks. There's actually a culture down there that you are randomly slaughtering, and don't you feel guilty about it now, you bastard?
Exactly. Which one of the last books, or close to, also featured introducing the idea of orcs to Discworld, which had a very similar idea of, hey, let's see what they are beyond just the killable monster class.
And goblins, he did the same thing with goblins directly in his book Snuff.
Yes.
And another little innovation, Terry Pratchett, he died from complications of Alzheimer's. And as he started playing Skyrim, he started having problems because, as anybody who played Skyrim or the Elder Scrolls games knows, you can wind up going exploring and then forget, wait, what the heck was I doing? Well, this was a problem for with his Alzheimer's, but he still wanted to play the game. And it occurred to him, wait, I've got a companion. Why can't the companion guide me back out of this hole in the ground I'm in? Well, somebody talked with him about that, and they created a special companion. And they eventually made a mod that applied this to all the companions in the game, that you install this mod, you get lost in a dungeon, you can tell the companion, hey, do you know how the heck we get out of here? And the companion can guide your player back to the opening. And I just think that's kind of cool, but also very indicative of the kind of thoughtful writer and person that Terry Pratchett was, and how that kind of goes into the same philosophy of the Discworld games, and how it was not a Sierra game. It wasn't even a LucasArts game. There was no way for you to mess the game up by exploring, trying stuff. You can't lose the one item that you need to get through the puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
I think the only place where that can possibly happen is that in the early stages, when you're going into the Patrician's Palace, you have to trick your way past the guards. And I think at one point, maybe there is one point where you can accidentally go past them and not have a way to get back and miss out on one item, but you have to work to make that happen.
And then the game was pretty successful. It came out in 1995, and it was successful enough that a sequel came out a year later, which is Discworld 2, Missing Presumed ... which, like I said, it borrows the plot of Reaperman, but it also has a lot of elements from moving pictures in it, which is... So the plot of Reaperman is essentially death takes a vacation and the world starts going to hell because of it. Metaphysical forces are failing. People aren't dying. It's a problem that's going to grow to be a bigger problem. Where is death? Why is he not working? And then Moving Pictures is the Discworld takeoff on Hollywood. So filmmaking and all of that stuff. So they kind of smashed those two together and put Rincewind in charge, and we had another adventure game.
They also put a little bit of Mort into Discworld 2, but just add one quick thing. I know I keep doing that. Discworld 2 was just called Missing Presumed in the UK. In the United States,
Mortality
it was
Bites.
released... Mortality Bites. And I remember this pretty well because, crazily enough, Discworld 2 came and went pretty quickly as far as it was released in the United States. I could not get it at any game shop in DFW at that time. Miraculously, I managed to acquire a copy of it from a Funko Land in New York City while I was on my senior trip.
What'd you get from New York? A video game. Thank God.
Well, I got a bit more than that, but I just happened to stop by on the way to someplace else, and it was there. And I said, okay, this is a sign. I'm grabbing this now. I got a bit more from the trip to New York than that, but, it's just funny. Yeah. Oh, what did I get? Oh, I got a copy of the Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum playbook and Discworld 2.
I do love A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum.
It's my favorite musical. I got to see it with Whoopi Goldberg on Broadway.
It's definitely up there for me. Yeah. Matt and I don't talk as much as we used to. We could just sit here and talk amongst ourselves for a while. You guys can go take a nap. They brought back
Mort. Sorry. What I was originally diverting off. They do have Mort in Discworld 2 as well, because Act 1, Death disappears, and you have to, as Rincewind, find a way to summon Death, get the items to do the magic ritual, summon Death. Part 2, you find out, well, Death has quit because he is feeling unappreciated, so you have to enter the film industry to make a movie about Death to make Death seem awesome. And then he becomes such a big star, he doesn't want to go back to his job. So Act 3 is Rincewind having to basically pull what happened in the book Mort, where Death gets an apprentice who takes over the job, and Rincewind has to become Death.
Yeah, it's hard to have the plot of Reaper Man without some of the plot of Mort. They do tie together pretty closely, so that makes sense.
It does come in a fair bit in some of the Death books where Death gets sidetracked by something and somebody else has to take over, quote unquote, the duty.
Mm-hmm.
But how it winds up coloring whoever takes the role, so they become less human, and Death becomes more human the longer he's away from the job. Kind of like Meet Joe Black.
We get Eric Idle back. We do not get Tony Robinson, and John Pertwee died before production started, unfortunately.
But we did get Nigel Planer.
Yep, we got Nigel Planer back. I'm trying to see. I don't recognize any of the other voice actors.
I forget the name of the actress who was in it, but they did bring her back.
It says here that the Death of Rats is voiced by Catherine the Crocodile. So figure that one out.
Yeah.
That seems on brand. The game, I mean, it came out just a year later. It looks and feels very much like the first game. It has the same art style. It has the same sense of humor. Honestly, I would put it roughly on par quality-wise. They're both very good games.
They're both very good. I'd say that the second one has slightly better animation, though.
Sure, a minor improvement there, but by and large,
it looks more like they did cell animation rather than pixel animation. And I mostly remember this just because there's a joke at the beginning, and of all the random things of parody, the opening of Discworld 2 is a parody of Lethal Weapon 3. the car bomb scene.
Yes.
Only with Rincewind and the librarian in place of Mel Gibson and John Glover. And after this big explosion, they say, well, they've improved the animation. That's a good sign. Ooh. Well, of course it's a good sign. It means that they've had less money to spend on stupid puzzles.
No, they had exactly as much money to spend on stupid puzzles.
Well, there was the hope.
So, yeah, these two games came out within a year of each other and were considered successes. They performed very well. Apparently, Discworld 2 was a massive hit in Europe.
Makes sense.
Which led to another sequel coming out 4 years later. And I know Matt doesn't have the experience with this one, unfortunately.
I never did track this one down back in the day. I did acquire it recently, but I have only gotten as far as installing it on my computer and making sure it runs. I have not actually played it yet.
The third game is Discworld Noir, which is very different in almost every way. Rincewind is not the main character. It is an original story, not based on any of the Discworld books, although it is set in the Discworld. It is not a 2D animated. It is 3D animated, so it's, fully realized environments. It is a darker, grimmer setting. You play the Discworld's first private eye because you got fired from the City Watch for taking a bribe. And then at a certain point in the story, you actually get bitten by a werewolf, and there are entire chapters where you are a wolf. And instead of seeing things, the whole visual look of the game changes because you're operating by smell and you're tracking down clues that way. The story itself is a parody of every noir film. I would say heavily leaning on things like The Maltese Falcon, any Humphrey Bogart story. Weirdly, there's a cameo from not Laura Croft, who is basically Laura Croft. Like, it looks like her. The name is a few letters off. I can't remember exactly what they call her.
Laura Croft.
Probably. That sounds about right.
Yeah.
The interesting thing, so this game came out about the same time that the publisher went bankrupt. So the game was released, but it is extremely buggy, and it never got officially patched. Playing through the game is difficult. I actually got it to work on a Windows ME laptop, and apparently the instability of ME and the instability of Discworld Noir kind of was a chocolate and peanut butter situation, because there were frequent crashes, but I was able to get through the game. But I remember there was the bugs are so bad that I unlocked hidden voice acting in the game, because there was a scene where you had to get an item out of like a locked chest with a glass front on it. And what you're supposed to do is you get a diamond and you cut a circle in the glass and you can reach in and take the item. I had a crowbar from earlier in the game. You're supposed to lose the crowbar when you complete using it for a puzzle. But then I was walking through and the crowbar was back where I originally picked it up. So I picked it up again. And I tried to use that to pry open the case. And the game had voice acting that accused me of being a cheater because I should not have that item at this point in the game. And I must have hacked the game somehow.
Wow.
That one will stick with me forever. I don't know, like, writing the dialogue and then voice acting it in case somebody used like, why? That scenario shouldn't happen unless literally I'm hacking the game or the game is bugged. Why do you take time to write and voice act a line for something that should never happen unless they did it just to entertain themselves, the devs? I don't know.
Which would explain a lot, but yeah. I have not played the game, but I know it has become somewhat infamous with the Discworld purists who have played it because, well, to give an example of a completely different game, and let me just ask Jeff, have you seen the Discworld GURPS RPG?
I have the books.
Okay. Did you get the big one where they unified and rewrote everything for the last edition of GURPS?
No, I did not. I have the original 2 editions. Or
okay.
2 versions.
Yeah, they did one big book that had all the rules updated, although I found flipping through it that they make references to stuff that got left out of the book, so go yay editing. But it just fascinated me because they talk about different character ideas for running a pen and paper Discworld game, and it talks about how there has never been a private eye on Discworld, so that might be a fascinating thing. And it's like, okay, we're ignoring the game or just pretending that didn't happen. But when you get into the stuff on werewolves, it also says that as far as we know in Discworld, werewolfism is not infectious. Since there isn't any reference in the books to people being bitten and becoming werewolves, the closest it happens is Gaspode makes a joke when Angua the vampire watch captain threatens him and says, "Oh, what are you going to do? Bite me? Hey, that might even out my mange. Go for it."
Yeah. Discworld Noir, I guess, isn't canon and is largely ignored, which is a shame because it's honestly a pretty good game. It's a good story. It's fun to have a new Discworld story with a lot of new elements, like Luton, who is the first and only private investigator in Ankh-Morpork or on the disc at all. It has those darker elements from pulling in the noir films. There's some hints of some H.P. Lovecraft stuff going on in the background. It's a damn shame that this game is not more popular, more well-known, and more playable. The last time I looked, somebody has made a patch that's supposed to make it perform better. I haven't tried it.
That may be the version that I downloaded. But yeah, in fairness, I mentioned the canon, but none of the Discworld games are canon to the books. I mean, as noted, Rincewind is way more proactive in the games. I mean, in the books, he would be trying to escape from responsibility 90% of the time until it became clear, okay, yeah, the world actually is going to come to an end. Fine, I'll save it. Someone has to.
Now, being an original story, being not based on something written by Terry Pratchett did at least send the developers a story outline and like a draft of the script because he wanted this to be a detective story set in Ankh-Morpork. So he was somewhat involved. Nigel Planer comes back as a voice actor. Kate Robbins.
Kate Robbins, that was one I was thinking of.
They add Robert Llewellyn, who is Crichton from Red Dwarf, which is fun.
Wow.
Yeah, he's actually, he voices several characters in the game as well.
And he's always a good voice actor.
So, I mean, there's not a whole lot more to talk about the game itself. I like it. I would love to play it again, but getting it to run on a modern computer, getting it to run on contemporary computers at the time was hard. Getting it to run on a modern computer is very difficult. Hopefully the version that you've got will run, but do not be surprised if it crashes out on you a lot, because it always has.
I just basically opened it up and tried playing around with the interface a little bit and going, oh, this is that wonky CG three-dimensional Escape from Monkey Island interface. Yeah. I don't like this already, but
it is definitely a product of its time. It also came out on, there is a PlayStation version that supports the PlayStation Mouse, which I had never heard of before.
I had heard of that, but
that is the three main Discworld books, plus you got to hear a little bit about the GURPS and the MUD and the Commodore 64 version. So it's not.
There is a brand new Discworld RPG coming out shortly.
Is there?
Pen and Paper. They did a Kickstarter for it. It's published by Mofidius or Modifus. My dyslexic brain is forgetting. They're the same guys who did the Fallout Pen and Paper RPG.
I missed that somehow, and I pay attention to when these things come up on Kickstarter. Okay, I'm gonna have to go check that out.
I don't know send why. You the link.
I don't know why, because I used to run a tabletop group here, but I don't even do that anymore. So I just keep collecting these books for games that I never get to play.
my world, and welcome to it, except I am still running a group on Sunday nights. But yeah, I have about 6 shelves on my little cube unit of RPG books. I'm probably never going to run most of these again. Haven't run some of them. But gosh darn it, the little primitive knot at the top of my spine says I need to own the Blade Runner RPG.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I've got 2 shelves full of books, games that I know I will never play or run, and I'm still getting more, and I don't know why. It's an illness. Next time we talk to Matt, we will be talking about the Tex Murphy series. But for now, let's say goodbye to Discworld.
Goodbye to Discworld.
The first 2 games are definitely a good time. If you like point-and-click adventure games, you should track them down. If you want a technical challenge for yourself, see if you can get the 3rd one up and running. The story is interesting, and it's the only place you can encounter that particular Discworld story. That alone, I think, makes it worth trying. So, any closing thoughts on Discworld, Matt?
If you have not read the Discworld books, track them down. Sir Terry Pratchett and, one other random thing that just, with all the other random stuff we were tanging off on, you mentioned the Laura Croft character. That's kind of funny because all the new Discworld products are being overseen by Terry Pratchett's daughter, Rhianna Pratchett, who is also a game designer, who is best known for having been the creative mind behind the Laura Croft Tomb Raider reboot.
Yeah, the trilogy that came out that reinvented the genre. They're very good. I actually prefer her work on the Overlord series, which
that too
is evil Pikmin, essentially. It really does all of the twisted fantasy tropes and humor that you would expect from a Pratchett. Rhianna Pratchett is a very good writer and game designer. When Terry passed, he left the rights to all of Discworld to her, but she basically said, no, I'm not working on expanding on my father's work. I'm not going to work on adapting my father's work. It is what it is.
Well, she said that, but she is now doing one adaptation. I know we're trying to close up, but they just recently, a couple of weeks ago, announced that they are now doing an officially licensed line of graphic novels. All of the Discworld books are going to get an official graphic novel adaptation, and Rihanna has said that she is going to personally adapt the script for all 5 of the Tiffany Aching series, the young adult books that Terry Pratchett wrote that are based in the Discworld, but they were a young adult series about a young girl who has to save the world from an invasion of elves when nobody else is there to do it.
They're very good books. Even the young adult series feel perfectly fine for an adult to read. I'm not sure exactly what differentiates them, what makes them young adult, because they're basically written on the same level as his regular books. Like, they're not dumbed down. The target audience is probably aimed a little younger, but he doesn't change the language. He doesn't change how he writes.
I think there's some slightly simpler word choices, but he does explain the more complicated words a little bit.
Yeah, Tiffany Aching loves the word susurration, which is not a word you find in most adult books. But yes, he does make a point of defining the word for you. So yeah, that's just... And you'll notice we at no point discussed the City Watch TV series. Anyway, good night. We'll see you next time. Thank you all for listening.
We discussed that. That's going to be a whole episode of me swearing.
Yeah, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to remember it exists, and I'm sorry I brought it up.
The only reason I even look at it anymore is just they never officially canceled it. As far as I can tell, they never officially canceled it. It's just kind of with BBC America's original creation department kind of shutting down. It just kind of got presumed it shut down, but there was never an official cancellation. There was never an official stop. So they could make a season 2, but nobody wants it.
Up. Don't give them ideas.
No, it's not happening.
I have rarely seen an adaptation that so completely misses the point at every step of the way. They screwed up the characters, they screwed up the setting, they screwed up the story. Anyway, no, we're not here for that.
No, we aren't.
Thank you all for listening. We will talk to you next time. Thank you, Matt.
My pleasure.